Hi guys, welcome to part 3 of our LED strip series of lessons and courses. What we're going to look at today is controllers. Controllers is something that we always have a lot of questions about, and it's more about how do I use them, what are they for, where do they go, and so on. So what we're going to do is try and answer all of those questions today, and then at the end of the lesson, you'll have your own questions to answer. So to give you a bit of an indication, at the bottom you'll see a link to download your own paperwork. So this gives you a bit of a course outline, and then when we turn over, we've got the fact sheet. This is where we're taking all of our information from. So we've put this together to help you, and it's a resource which you can keep and refer to if required. So what we're looking at today is controllers. We're going to explain what a controller is, the difference between a controller and a power supply, the need for a controller, how a controller can be used as a dimmer, and so on and so forth. Is a power supply still required, and things like that. So let's get underway. So at the end of this, we hope you've got a pretty good understanding. So let's get into it. What is an LED controller? When we talk about controllers, we speak about a device which is more commonly used with LED strip in the form of RGB, red, green, blue, in some instances white, or variations of. So what the controller does is actually allows us to operate through either a remote control, handheld remote control, or an app or something like that. So the controller allows that little bit of RF, Wi-Fi or digital control. So before we go too far into it, what I want to do is just discuss a little bit about the RGB LED and what it's all about, because so long as we've got an understanding there, it makes the adaptation of the controller so much easier. So an RGB is actually 3 LEDs in one, a red, a green and a blue. Now, some people ask me, if I've got red, green, blue, can I get white? Well, you can get what they call a blue-white. So you can actually draw a white out of an RGB, but it's 3 LEDs in one. So by having 3 LEDs in one, what does that mean? We're going to have a positive, we're going to have an R, a G and a B. We're going to have 4 wires, okay? So we can't just attach that directly to a power supply, because the power supply only has 2 wires, so we have to have a controller. So when we look at this, and when we look at the spectrum, a controller is used to actually allow us to grow or to go through the color wheel. Okay, there's a couple of examples here of the color wheel and the 256 shades of each and every color. Okay, so when you combine the 3 LEDs, it gives you 16.7 million color combinations. All right, so we can't control that with anything analog or anything like that, so we need a proper controller, and this is what it means. So let's go back to what is an LED controller. All right, so based on what we've just revised and the fact that we need to be able to control over 16 million color combinations, this is where a controller comes into play. It allows through various platforms a way to manage the color combinations simply, whilst also allowing the user the ability to create scenes, create ambience in a home, an office, an entertainment venue. So in short, an LED controller is a device which sits between the power supply and the LED strip and takes control of the LED strip. Remember, doesn't have to just be RGB. We can use it on white. We can use it on multiple channels of white. We can control however we want, whatever we want through a controller. Okay, so what is the difference between a controller and a power supply? Strangely enough, I do have a lot of people that go out and they will buy a controller and think that's the power supply. It's not the case. The controller actually operates off a 12-volt DC power supply, or a 36 volt, or a 24 volt. But operates off a DC supply provided to the controller, which means I've got to have a driver. I've got to have a power source, okay, and I've got to have a regulated voltage output, basically. All right, the power supply provides the regulated voltage output. The controller is the device designed to manage and control the LED strip. In short, and that's as simple as it can be put. Without the other, we don't have control over our LED strip. The right power supply, the right controller, and on our RGB or RGBW LED strip, we can control it, we can manage it, and we can achieve the goals that we want to achieve. And that is normally a feature, a color, a look, an ambience, or something like that. So let's take that next step, and we've gone through why, in short, why we need a controller. But there is other reasons why we need a controller as well. So if, for example, I want to control my LED strip, but I want to control it using a 0 to 10 volt. I'm only using a single color, but I want to use a 0 to 10 volt dimmer, or I want to use DALI, or I want to use DMX, which are all dimming protocols, but I want to be able to dim it. I don't want to use a rotary dimmer, a standard basic leading or trailing edge dimmer on the wall that I've just picked up from Bunnings. I want to be able to use an actual system to control my LED. So what do I have to do there? I have to move to a specific controller. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Just when we talk about the controller that we use here, this is the controller that we use, and it's called the 1009 FAWI. F-A-W-I. Okay, now what it is, it's a Wi-Fi RF controller. Now, it requires a power supply. It has 12 volts coming in at one end, 12, 24 or 36 volts at one end, and it has our positive and our RGB and W as outputs. Okay, so it sits power supply, this, and then our LED strip. Now that allows me to use a remote control, so I could use a remote control similar to that, or a remote control similar to this. This remote control here is an 8-zone remote control. Okay, and this remote control here is a 4-zone remote control. Okay, so it's a 4-zone remote control. Okay, so these remote controls, without this, do not work because they need that RF control to actually connect to. So that's one form of controlling our LED strip. Okay, the next form is if I've now decided that I want to use DALI. So here is my 4-channel DALI dimmer. So this 4-channel DALI dimmer allows me now to use the DALI bus, give it an address. So there is a series of dip switches and things like that on here, which allow me to program it. So it's a programmable controller. So through this window here, it allows me to program it, give it an address, which means from when I program my DALI system, I can tell this to do whatever I want it to do. So I can tell it to turn on. We can have sensors that control it because everything works on a DALI bus. Okay, so and this is 4 channels, so I can do RGBW, or I can just do a single channel if I want, or I can have 4 DALI inputs controlling 4 different strips of LED. Okay, these will not work with this. Okay, this is a DALI designed LED strip driver. All right, so as simple as that's put. Okay, and then we have our ML2002, which will do the 0 to 10, and we have a DMX driver. So drivers are available, but what I'm saying here is they are specific to the purpose that's required. So these it comes down to the questions that you've got to ask. You know, basically a controller will provide full control over your LED strip, provide control over the colors, the scenes, the fading, the dimming, the remote tuning, or turning it on and off and things like that. But you've got to have the right controller. Am I using DALI? Am I using 0 or 1 to 10 volt? Am I using DMX? What am I using? You've got to find out that first. Controllers are available to do it, but you've got to work it out yourself first. Okay. Can a controller be used as a dimmer? Sure can, because this is, like we mentioned before, this is the 1009 FAWI, or as we call it, the FAWI. Okay, Wi-Fi remote, it's got an RF remote control, which is these little devices here. We've got the Stitchy 5 channel, which will allow you to control it by voice. So we've got that, which is available, and which will allow app, voice control. In some instances, you can operate it through a computer. So we have our DALI, which will operate through a DALI system. They're all dimmers. They're all dimmers at the end of the day. They all allow you to control it, dim it, create a scene, a routine, or whatever you need. Okay, but without those, and if that's just connected directly to a power supply, you've basically got on and off. If you've got a dimmable power supply, you've got your rotary dimmer on the wall, which you'd go back to a conventional domestic dwelling. Why is a power supply still required? Simply put, these are not power supplies. Okay, these cannot operate themselves. I need a correctly sized power supply to drive all of these. Okay, to drive everything needs the correctly sized power supply with the correct output to make sure these work and are also able to control the load that I've got attached to the controller. So primarily, if this is 10 watts per meter and I've got 5 meters, I've got 50 watts, my power supply has to be able to manage that 50 watts. Okay, if I'm going to dim it, I cannot dim a dimmer. So it's pointless putting a dimmable power supply on a controller, because the dimming of the power supply will not dim because the controller's got the ultimate control over the LED strip. We basically just went through this. What type of power supply does a controller require? When we're looking at any of these controllers here, they're constant voltage. Okay, constant voltage. Basically, you just want to maintain the voltage in, the voltage out allows the strip to be maintained and a constant light level coming out of the strip. We have to be mindful of voltage drop because now we've got something in the middle, so voltage drop can take effect between the power supply and the controller and the LED strip. So we have to be mindful of the distances and the type of cable that we're using to ensure that we don't have any voltage drop issues. Does the controller limit the length of the LED strip? No. No, it doesn't. Purely because the only thing that limits the length of the LED strip is the LED strip itself. Okay, you'll see this happen in every part that we go through because it's probably one of the most misunderstood facts about LED strip. So if we're looking at a standard everyday 12 volt DC LED strip, max length is 5 meters. 24 volt, 10 meters, and so on. There is a chart and there's information here in your paperwork to explain all of that. But no, the controller does not limit the length of the strip. Does the controller limit the length of the cable? Again, no. No, it doesn't. The controller doesn't have any control over the voltage drop that you will get. And here's something for you. Okay, so this is the normal cable, right, that would come with your LED strip. And it's very, very tiny. It's, a 0.32, it's very tiny. Then you can go up to your figure 8 flexes, which is slightly larger, slightly bigger again. And then we can go up to a cable that we can go up to 10 meters with. Because its size, it's a bit like the old fire hose that I drew previously for a previous lesson. And that is, if I have a hose that's this big, right? and I have a hose that's this big, I can get 100 litres a minute out of that one. I can get 15 litres a minute out of this one. Okay, so if that was an electrical cable and up to 3 metres, yeah, sure, I'll get my 12 volts here. But if I go to 5 metres, I could end up with 10.9. If I go 7 metres, I could end up with about 9. Whereas with this one, with the larger cable, I could go 5 metres straight up and still have 12. I could go 7, I could go 10, and I'd still end up with 12 volts at the end. Okay, so what we're saying there is the controller does not limit the length of the cable limits itself. So when you get LED strip, you'll get these little tails. They're about 150 mil long, okay, attached. So if you have a large distance between the controller and the LED strip, keep the tail on, but just attach a larger cable from that tail to where the controller is, and then a small bit of cable at the end, because it's going to carry the bulk of the load, and it'll reduce your voltage drop over that distance. Because what you do want to have at the end of the day is 12 volts at your strip, a good, clean, solid 12 volts. The controller does not limit that. It's the cable that limits that. And that's where we talk about voltage drop. And this is what, you know, we go into voltage drop again here. But we go through the process of how to calculate voltage drop, why it's important and things like that. So we will ask some questions, but we've got a voltage drop calculator that we've prepared, and there'll be a link at the end of this voltage drop section for you to actually click on, and it'll take you. It's an Excel, so you'll be able to download it and keep it, put it on your desktop, and actually be able to use it as a voltage drop. We've loaded all of our LED strip into it. So you'll be able to select the strip, put your length in there, put your length of tails, and it'll tell you straight away whether you need to up your cable or not. Okay, it's quite user-friendly. All right, we've also got on there the formulas. Look, because we're talking DC cables, there is a fixed factor, and that is the 0.017. That has to remain there because that is a DC derating factor, and it has to be on there. Okay, so when you're doing your actual calculations, length by current by over the area, and that'll give you your voltage drop. All right, we've done some samples there, which you can see, you know, in one point we've got 1.19 volt DC drop, which means we're only going to have 10.81 volts at the LED strip. It's too low. It's too low. The LED strip will not be brilliant. You won't have your clear, crisp, sharp colours. You'll have very dull, and it'll look a bit milky. So make sure you've got 12 volts and you've got a good solid 12 volts there. Okay, there's some more sample calculations that we've done for you. Okay, so what controllers are in the EMELEC range? There is a list of the controllers that are in the EMELEC range there. Now, these are also in all of your paperwork. They're also all over our website. So if you take any of those part numbers, the ML2303BA, put it in and you'll get all the spec sheet, the data sheet and everything on the information. I have taken a lot of that information and I've also put it into your fact sheet, into your workbook. All right, so all of that information as you go through, they all have a different purpose. And there's no one controller that does everything. Each controller has its own pros and cons. Okay, the most common out of all of them would be the ML1009 FAWI. The next one that would be equally as popular would be the Dali ML2303BEA, the 4-channel. Okay, so, excuse me. So they are probably the most common. The other ones are there and they're available. The DMX is rare because DMX is used in theatres. And some people try and use DMX in home theatres, but a home theatre is not actually big enough to integrate your lighting with your music, with the TV and things like that. You need a lot of technology, and also DMX is very, very expensive. Okay, so we also have a range of remotes. So we've got our 8-channel, which is listed up there. We have our 4-channel, which is our most common which is our 2819S. We also have our single colour remote. So if you remember before, we were talking about having the Fowey and being able to control the Fowey with the remote and having a just white strip. Well, that's how we do it. Okay, if you match the remote with the Fowey with the strip, you'll have full control, and you'll be able to have a remote control at the same time. Oh, excuse me. So again, we just continue on with all of the remotes. We've got some wall-mounted remotes. We've got a wall-mounted colour remote and things like that, but they do require 240 volts, and they are wall-mounted, but they are the same size as a standard Clipsal or HPM switch plate. Okay, what we've also added here are some wiring examples for those controllers. Now, like we mentioned before, when we look at the controllers, a lot of the questions I get is, oh, I don't know how to wire it. Can you send me a wiring diagram? Well, here are those wiring diagrams. Now, also to help, they're also all in your paperwork. Okay, all of those wiring diagrams that you can see on the PowerPoint presentation now are also in all of your paperwork. Now, the reason for that is it's a quick reference. You've got your Fowey, you've got your RGB, you've got your single colour, you've got your RGBW, you've got your dual colour hybrid. So a hybrid strip is one that has white, warm white and neutral white, fully controllable through a remote control. And then we have our ML2002, which is our 0 to 10 volt. We haven't got the DALI ones up there, purely because if you're doing DALI, you'll know how to wire DALI. And yes, that's an assumption, and I get that, but basically the wiring of all of those is very, very similar on the output side. Even on the input side, you've still got a power supply coming in. That's all the same. The difference on a DALI is you will have a DALI bus coming to it. That is realistically the only difference. So, in conclusion, controllers, there's not a huge amount to talk about. So long as you get in your mind, you have to work out your situation first. Work out, what am I going to do, how am I going to do it, and what do I want to achieve? Once you've done that, you can work it out. So we've gone through, what is an LED controller? What is the difference between an LED controller and a power supply? Why do I need a controller? Is a controller a dimmer? Does a controller require a power supply? Yes, it does. What type of power supply is required? Have a look at your controller. It will always tell you. Does it limit the length of the LED strip? Does it limit the length of the cable? No, it doesn't. Voltage drop, LED controllers and remotes, that's where we go through in a bit of detail. And wiring examples. Those wiring examples will help you get through most issues. So, and also it shows you where to test and how to test. All right, so at this point in time, there will be a test at the end of this, a little 10-question test. Once you complete that, you click submit, and they'll send you out a certificate of completion of this course. This is now part 3. We've got part 4 and 5 to go, and then that's the end of the LED strip. But that goes into now designing and the questions to ask your customers and things like that, which we'll go through next. That'll be in part 4. All right, we have resources and tools on our website. You'll have already joined MWorld, but get other people to join MWorld and give them access to these courses because they're free and they're there to help you. Also, the on-site warranty process has changed. Now, you don't have to register your sites. Basically, just go on and lodge a claim if you have a failure or a fault. Make sure you have your purchase receipt, and if you use any hire equipment, upload the receipt for your hire equipment and submit that for approval. Once it's approved, you can submit your invoice. So we're there to help, and hopefully through all this training, we really do get some benefit out of it. So for this one, thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you on part 4.